The 9,840th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda of this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. I now give the floor to Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix.
Mr. President, members of the Security Council, I thank you for the opportunity to brief on the situation with respect to UNIFIL. I will commence with that brief on UNIFIL, and after this briefing, I believe General Gosha will brief on UNDOF. Mr. President, as I briefed you earlier this week, on the 13th of January, the cessation of hostilities between Lebanon and Israel, while fragile, continues to hold. During the ongoing visit to Lebanon of the United Nations Secretary General, I had the opportunity to visit the UNIFIL area of operation earlier today with the Secretary General, of course, and we saw firsthand the situation on the ground. We also met with the Lebanese armed forces and with the caretaker Prime Minister in Beirut. From what I observed and based on what our interlocutors shared, the Lebanese authorities are committed to upholding their commitments under the cessation of hostilities and Resolution 1701. And I reiterate, the United Nations, including, of course, UNIFIL, is absolutely committed to supporting the parties in this regard. The Lebanese armed forces have deployed to 93 locations south of the Litani River as of 15th of January, compared with an estimated 10 locations on 27 November. UNIFIL has supported the Lebanese army in its deployment to many of these locations. As part of a plan to deploy an additional 6,000 troops south of the Litani, the Lebanese armed forces have recently deployed 262 newly recruited personnel to the South Litani sector, while another 673 recruits are undergoing training, and an additional 600 individuals are undergoing pre-recruitment screening. I acknowledge the efforts of the Military Technical Committee with the participation of several true contributing countries, which is also supporting the Lebanese armed forces in its recruitment and deployment efforts. To facilitate closer coordination with the Lebanese armed forces, UNIFIL has stationed a liaison officer at the LAF South Litani sector headquarters. With additional capabilities in the south and the renewed commitment from the Lebanese armed forces to fulfill their obligation under Resolution 1701, we expect further improvement in the collaboration with UNIFIL moving forward. We are encouraged to hear that a plan for a sequence withdrawal of the IDF and deployment of the Lebanese armed forces was presented at the meeting of the cessation of hostilities mechanism on the 6th of January. With 10 days until the end of the stated 60-day period for the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Lebanon. However, Israeli demolition of tunnels, buildings, and agricultural land continue. Some airstrikes have also been reported, as have ongoing violations of Lebanese airspace. In addition, UNIFIL continues to detect trajectories of projectiles fired from south to north of the blue line, although at a much lower level compared to before 27 November. UNIFIL has only detected 3 trajectories fired from north to south of the blue line since 27 November, and none since the 2nd of December. Noting that the Israel Defense Forces has stated that its actions are targeting Hezbollah assets and personnel, the continued presence of the Israeli Defense Forces in Lebanon is a violation of Resolution 1701. We urge the Israeli Defense Forces to withdraw from Lebanese territory, and certainly by the end of the period envisaged in the announcement of the cessation of hostilities. The last year has clearly demonstrated the significant presence of unauthorized armed personnel, assets and weapons related to Hezbollah and other non-state armed groups south of the Litani in blatant violation of Resolution 1701. Encouragingly, the Lebanese armed forces have shown increased resolve in dealing with these in recent weeks. The mission has itself located 116 caches of weapons and ammunition, including rocket-propelled grenade launchers, rockets, anti-tank mines, and rifles. It has also observed some potential tunnel and Hezbollah sites. In all these instances, UNIFIL has informed the Lebanese armed forces for their appropriate action. It is vital that the Lebanese authorities continue to actively fulfill their commitment under the Cessation of Hostilities Agreement and Resolution 1701. The Secretary General will, of course, underscore this message in his meetings with Lebanon's newly elected president, Speaker of the Parliament, and designate Prime Minister in Beirut tomorrow. At the same time, UNIFIL is adjusting its posture and operational activities to support the cessation of hostilities in line with its mandate under Resolution 1701. And we certainly hope that with the new political dynamics, new political setup in Lebanon, more space and political support will be forthcoming to UNIFIL as we move forward for the force to fully fulfill its mandate. The mission is working with United Nations headquarters and troop contributing countries to deploy strengthened capacities in the areas of mine clearance, unexploded ordnance disposal, and engineering to clear roads and facilitate a return to full patrolling and monitoring functions across the area of operations. Meanwhile, UNIFIL is stepping up its operational activities in areas where the security situation allows. These include areas further north of the Blue Line in Sector West. UNIFIL is now conducting an average of 50 operational activities and 28 logistic activities per day, compared with just 16 per day in total before 27 November. And UNIFIL would further strengthen and expand its operations. The mission will also seek to utilize technology to enhance its monitoring capacities along the Blue Line and throughout its area of operation. The acceptance by the parties of the use of technology in this regard will be testament to their continued commitment to uphold the cessation of hostilities and take real steps towards the full implementation of Resolution 1701. Furthermore, UNIFIL is continuously developing and fine-tuning its public messages to address mis- and disinformation and to bolster public understanding of its mandated function as part of an increasingly robust strategic communication strategy. Mr. President, UNIFIL monitors and reports on violations of Resolution 1701, and we will continue to report on such violation to this Council. With respect to the mechanism chaired by the United States with the participation of France, we urge the parties to utilize this forum as a means to resolve outstanding issues through coordination rather than unilateral action. In consultation with the parties, the US and France, UNIFIL is sharing information related to violations of Resolution 1701 with the mechanism with the consent of the parties. Critical to supporting the full implementation of Resolution 1701 is the mission's unrestricted freedom of movement and full access throughout its area of operations. Currently, 7 weeks since the cessation of hostilities came into effect, most contingents often remain confined to base and on occasion must seek shelter in bunkers due in particular to nearby IDF military activity or IDF advisory for UNIFIL to take shelter for their safety and security. A notable example of this occurred on 6th of January when UNIFIL personnel at Nakura headquarters took shelter for around 3 hours early morning while the IDF conducted demolitions nearby. That afternoon, the IDF commenced its withdrawal from locations around Nakura, coinciding with the meeting of the mechanism by UNIFIL, the afternoon of the 6th of January. UNIFIL's operational activities are further constrained through the presence of unexploded ordnance, IDF roadblocks at various locations and in the area of operation, and interference from local individuals. The mission has protested all restrictions of movement to the parties, and we will underscore these messages in our meetings with Lebanese officials this week. Despite these challenges, the mission is increasing the number and intensity of its operation. As the IDF has been replying to few, if not very few, of the mission's requests for deconfliction, the mission has adjusted to a notification system for critical operational and logistics movement. The mission continues to engage with the Israel Defense Forces to remove level 1, that is stay in base restrictions, so that it can return to level 1, normal activity, in all locations where the IDF is no longer present. Mr. President, while challenges remain, there is reason for optimism, coupled with strong determination that there will be no return to the past. confidence in security and stability along the Blue Line is necessary for the communities of southern Lebanon and northern Israel. The ongoing returns of residents to southern Lebanon will continue as Israeli forces withdraw and as reconstruction efforts gather speed. And we note that Israel has also presented a plan for the return of its residents to communities close to the Blue Line in March 2025. The election of a new president in Lebanon, as well as the designation of a prime minister tasked with forming a new government, are very important steps towards the strengthening of state institutions and the extension of state authorities throughout all of Lebanon's territory. In this regard, unequivocal political and material support from the Lebanese authorities for the strengthened deployment of the Lebanese armed forces south of the Litani River will be vital. Their ongoing support to UNIFIL actions will also be crucial. That is the support of the Lebanese authorities, the new Lebanese authorities. At the same time, we encourage renewed support from the international community for these efforts. To those member states contributing troops to UNIFIL and UNSO Observer Group Lebanon, we again extend our most sincere gratitude. Mr. President, members of the Security Council, General Gosha, who is serving temporarily as an acting head of mission and force commander of UNDOF until the deployment of Major General Anita Hasma in February, will now be briefing on the situation in the UNDOF area of operation. I would like to commend the efficiency and dedication of UNDOF and Observer Group Golan. The military and civilian personnel are serving in increasingly difficult circumstances. I thank you.
Monsieur Jean-Pierre Lacroix for his briefing. I now give the floor to Major General Patrick Gosha. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. President, member of the Security Council, I'm grateful for the opportunity to brief you on the situation in the UNDOF area of operations and the challenges faced by our peacekeepers on the Golan. The fall of the Assad government on 8 December has had an impact on the UNDOF area of operation and UNDOF activities. For example, the Syrian military is not represented anymore for the fortnightly inspections carried out through Observer Group Golan on the military position of the Syrian security forces, nor it is represented for discussions on presumed violations. While UNDOF has had continuous contact with Syrian interlocutors throughout these recent developments, liaison by UNDOF with Syria is impacted. The mission is working on establishing stable communication channels with the caretaker authorities. I note recent public statements by the caretaker authorities regarding their commitment to the 1974 agreement. UNDOF personnel supported by UNSO military observers serving in Observer Group Golan remain at all their positions occupied before December 2024. They continue to carry out their mandated activities, which include monitoring and observing the area of separation and the ceasefire lines, as well as patrolling the area of limitation. The Israeli Defense Forces remain present in the area of separation. The IDF continue to carry out construction work inside the area of separation with heavy equipment. They also set up communication equipment inside the area. The IDF has informed UNDOF that, I quote, it would enter the area of separation as a temporary defensive measure to prevent it from being occupied by non-state armed groups following the withdrawal of the Syrian authorities, end of quote. UNDOF has informed its Israeli counterparts that their presence and actions in the area of separation constitute a violation of the 1974 disengagement of force agreement, and UNDOF continues to reiterate in their ongoing contacts the need for full respect of the agreement. I must restate that the 1974 disengagement agreement between the State of Israel and the State of Syria remains valid. The full operational movement of UN personnel in the area of separation, including patrolling and logistical movement, has been impacted by the IDF presence and roadblock in the area. UNDOF used to conduct approximately 55 to 60 daily operational and essential logistical movement, and is currently restricted to approximately 10 essential logistical movement per day in this area of separation. But at the same time, UNDOF and Observe Group Golan could adapt their operations in the area of limitation on the Bravo side and increased the number of patrols from 10 to 40 per week. Also, UNDOF could neutralize a few unexploded ordinances that were found in public areas on the Bravo side, which represented a danger for the population. Residents in the area of separation have reached out to UNDOF to appeal for its assistance, to ask the IDF to leave their village centers and lift roadblocks impacting their agricultural works. They have protested that the IDF has disrupted their communities and expressed fear, reporting instances of damage and destruction allegedly by IDF battle tank to roads, water pumping stations, and solar panels. Some residents have also protested IDF searches in their villages, with some reporting arrests of their relatives. UNDOF is liaising with the Israeli authorities, including the IDF and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in this regard, and lately several discussions indicated positive exchanges and real progress. Mr. President, it is imperative that the UN peacekeepers are allowed to carry out their mandated task without obstruction. The mission has consistently called on all parties to maintain the ceasefire, refrain from any action in violation of the 1974 Agreement on Disengagement, and to respect UNDOF and its mandate. The mission maintains its liaison with the IDF to ensure that it continues to carry out its operational activities in a safe and secure manner without any hindrance to its freedom of movement to fully implement its mandate. There should be no military forces or activities in the area of separation other than UNDOF. It is imperative that all parties respect their obligation under the 1974 Disengagement of Force Agreement and uphold the terms of the agreement to preserve stability on the Golan. We count on the continued support of member states to ensure that UNDOF continues to have at its disposal all means and resources for effective and efficient level of operational activities. The mission needs to return to its full mandate implementation as prescribed in the Disengagement of Force Agreement signed by the parties and mandated under the Security Council Resolution 350 decided in 1974. Mr. President, let me conclude by extending once again our heartfelt condolences to the family of Brigadier General Amitabh Shah, who passed away on 23rd December last year during his tour of duty as Deputy Force Commander of UNDOF. I'm grateful to the countries providing military personnel to UNDOF and UNSO for their critical contributions, which are key factors in the force's ability to implement the mandate. I commend the efficiency and dedication of UNDOF and Observer Group Golan personnel, military and civilian. Thank you.
I thank Major General Patrick Gauchat for his statement. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements. And I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
President, we'd like to thank USG Jean-Pierre Lacroix and the head of UNSO, General Patrick Gauchat, for their comprehensive briefings on the situation in the areas of operations of Blue Helmets in Lebanon and in the Golan Heights. We're grateful to the Algerian presidency also for organising today's meeting. Against the increasing tension in the region, of key importance is the UN member states and their Security Council, which, to protect peacekeepers faced with direct threats to their security and hindrances to implementing their mandate. And this will be hinged on the future of peacekeeping, and without support from all members of the Security Council, would be simply impossible. From the briefings, it's clear today that and UNIFIL and UNDOF are facing the same specific challenges. Here we're talking about Israel's high-handed acts in violation of Security Council resolutions, GA resolutions, and also international agreements. In Lebanon, recently, there was a recent land invasion with IDF, and they occupied part of the territory from the north of the Blue Line, attacked UNIFIL facilities, including using tanks. The Israeli military political leadership in the heat of war even demanded that peacekeepers withdraw from south of Lebanon in violation of the Security Council Resolution 1701 and 2749. To the credit of peacekeepers, they did not waver against these in face of these direct threats, and they did not concede a step. We are convinced that this strong position, supported by members of the Security Council and TCCs as well, and the Secretariat of the UN, meant that the agreement on the ceasefire facilities in Lebanon on the 26th of November was possible. Unfortunately, as we approach the 60-day deadline of the agreement on Lebanon, and we hear these from the UN itself, many provisions of the document are far from being implemented. According to information that we have from Western Jerusalem, they have sent a signal that they intend to preserve control over 3 strategic heights at the south of Lebanon. Israel continues to violate the airspace, including carrying out arbitrary airstrikes. Israel's also shelled directly near where peacekeepers are, and that's been recorded too. A particular concern is large-scale destructions by Israel of civilian infrastructure and housing, and the prevention of movement of Lebanese and preventing them from returning home. Against the backdrop of minimal violations of agreements and the ceasefire, we need to think about the opportunity of stopping these from the renewed monitoring mechanism in Lebanon, which UNIFIL is part of. We reiterate our support to the initiative of the Algerian Friends to send a UN Security Council mission to this country, including to send a clear signal to preserve the ceasefire regime.
Even more unpredictable situation is developing in the disengagement sector. In Syria, the Israelis, taking advantage of a change of government in Damascus, have inflicted huge damage to Syria's military capabilities. They have seized over 500 square kilometers of land in contravention to the conditions of the Disengagement of Forces Agreement of 1974, and have taken over a buffer zone in the Golan, the Bravo side, the southeastern slope of Mount Hermon, and have moved deep into Syria in the Quneitra province. Western Jerusalem, there's worrisome signals from Western Jerusalem about the fact that the 1974 agreement is no longer valid and Mount Hermon should be returned to Israel. In these conditions, the Blue Helmets cannot effectively fulfill the tasks that they've been asked to do. At the same time, the new Syrian authorities have confirmed their agreement to deploy peacekeepers, UN peacekeepers in the buffer zone of the Golan Heights, and the Lebanese authorities have proven in word and deed their support for peacekeepers. We'd like to express our full support support for UNIFIL and UNDOF. They play key roles in supporting stability in the region and call on all sides to strictly ensure the security of the blue helmets and also to refrain any activities that limit their freedom of movement and hinder their fulfilling their mandate. We would like to recall that, as was confirmed yesterday in the presidential statement on Lebanon, peacekeepers should never become targets of attacks. Mr. President, the meaningful operation of UNIFIL and UNDOF is impossible as long as the sovereignty and territorial integrity of both Arab republics is threatened and specific resolutions of the Security Council and General Assembly are not implemented. This applies first and foremost to Israel that has penetrated deep into these Arab states. We call on the Security Council to unequivocally defend these principles without complying. It's impossible to normalize and stabilize the situation. All these problems have occurred not out of against the backdrop of unprecedented military operations by Israel. Its government openly speaks of a war on 7 fronts. These operations have until recently had the unconditional support, both military and political, from Washington. The U.S. failed policy has led to this crisis situation in which the Middle East finds itself. Its peaceful civilians and the peacekeepers working there, who continue to heroically fulfill their duty in accordance with the mandate that has been entrusted to them. Mr. President, the latest developments in this conflict give rise to a modest optimism. Now, of particular importance in this connection is the implementation in good faith and in full the agreements on the cessation of hostilities between Israel and Lebanon, Israel and Hamas. Key elements are well known: ending fighting, withdrawing Israeli forces, ensuring unhindered humanitarian access, and a return to universally recognized principles of the Middle East peace process enshrined in resolutions of the Security Council and the General Assembly. Thank you very much.
Representative of the Russian Federation, and now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you, Undersecretary General Lacroix and Major General Goshap, for your briefings today. UNIFIL, UNDOF, and UNSO maintain a critical role in upholding stability in the region. UNDOF remains a vital presence in the region and has an essential liaison function between the parties and with communities on the ground. Similarly, UNSO is essential to monitoring ceasefires, supervising armistice agreements, and preventing isolated incidents from escalating. UNIFIL has an important role to play in helping the Lebanese state move towards full implementation of Resolution 1701. The United States commends the more than 10,000 peacekeepers from over 50 countries serving with UNIFIL and over 1,200 peacekeepers serving with UNDOF. Their operating environment has been dynamic and at times volatile in recent months, and we thank the peacekeepers for their flexibility, resilience, and their commitment to remain in place and carry out their missions during this challenging period. As we discussed earlier this week, the United States remains committed to supporting Israel and Lebanon efforts to implement the arrangement they reached on November 27 in order for civilians to safely return to their homes on both sides of the Blue Line. We reiterate our call on all parties to respect the safety and security of UNIFIL personnel and premises and avoid incidents that expose them to risk or harm. This is key to UNIFIL's ability to conduct patrols and provide this council with information regarding conduct inconsistent with UNSC Resolution 1701. The United States has consistently reaffirmed its support for Israel's ability to exercise its right of self-defense consistent with international law. It is critical that all groups be mindful of the need to establish stability in Syria. In that regard, we take note of comments by Hayat Tahrir Hashem that Syria should not pose a threat to any of its neighbors, and we hope to see further actions towards that end. We note with concern reports that a civilian was killed in an attack on the Bravo side of the area of limitation on January 15. To that end, we urge all parties in the area of limitation to fully use UNDOF's critical liaison function to avoid miscommunication, and we hope to see a reduction in clashes and the restoration of calm in the buffer zone. Ultimately, we want to see lasting stability between Israel and Syria and support all sides upholding the 1974 disengagement agreement, including on the terms of the buffer zone and the means for its enforcement. We reaffirm our support for the disengagement of forces agreement. Israel has made clear its intent to uphold the terms of the agreement as soon as conditions allow, and that its actions are temporary and limited to defend its borders. To that end, we hope to see a reduction in clashes and the restoration of calm in the buffer zone. We also state emphatically again that UN peacekeeping personnel and positions must never be the target of an attack. We condemn any deliberate attack against UN personnel and positions. The safety and security of peacekeeping personnel are of utmost importance. I thank you.
Presidency give the floor to the representative of Lebanon.
السيد الرئيس في البداية
Mr. President, right from the outset, since this is the first time that Lebanon is taking the floor this month in the Security Council, allow me to congratulate you on taking over the presidency of the Council and thank you for the continued support of Algeria to Lebanon. Algeria has always stood by our side in defending just causes. I also thank the United States for the presidency last month. I also thank Russia for having requested this meeting, and I want to thank the keynote speakers, the commander of UNTSO, General Patrick Gauchat, and Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Operations Jean-Pierre Lacroix, who is currently in Lebanon, together with the Secretary General Antonio Guterres. I also want to take this opportunity to express the gratitude of Lebanon for this visit to show solidarity. At the beginning of this year, we find ourselves in a new chapter in Lebanon with the election of General Joseph Aoun as president and the appointment of prime minister to form a government. This constitutional government has given hope to the Lebanese people, especially young people, that Lebanon may recover and that we'll have a better Lebanon. In his statement, taking the oath of office, the president affirmed the right of the state to have monopoly over carrying of weapons, combat smuggling, terrorism, preserve the unity of our territory, and implement international resolutions, respect international agreements, and prevent Israeli aggression against Lebanese territory. Mr. President, Lebanon reiterates its commitment to the declaration of the cessation of hostilities and disengagement and the security arrangements in reference to the implementation of Resolution 1701. Lebanon has taken concrete steps to implement it. Army units are completing their deployment in Kura and in the western section of the South Lebanon after the withdrawal of Israeli forces, and in coordination with UNIFIL and the Committee of Five in charge of supervising the cessation of hostilities. In this context, the Lebanese army continues to demine and remove various debris. An initial group has been deployed to implement 1701. Volunteers have begun to be trained on specialized equipment destined for the military. Mr. President, at a time when Lebanon has confirmed its commitment to respect the cessation of hostilities, Israel continues to violate it. The number of attacks against Lebanon between the 27th of October and the 22nd of December is over 600 attacks, both by land and air. Israel has destroyed several times barrels that are there to mark the blue line. Last time was on the 4th of January. That same day, Israel, using bulldozers, destroyed an observation tower of the Lebanese army in flagrant violation of Resolution 1701. Israel continues to bomb border villages in Lebanon, to mine residential houses and block roads, preventing the return of Lebanese to their homes, thus undermining the process of reconstruction. Lebanon would like to warn against these repeated violations and attacks against its sovereignty. This is a grave threat to international efforts aimed at ensuring the security and stability in the region, and erodes efforts to restore calm along our borders. Lebanon calls your august assembly, and in particular the countries that sponsored the declaration, to adopt a clear position regarding the repeated violations by Israel, and to force Israel to uphold its obligations pursuant to the declaration of cessation of hostilities and relevant international resolutions, as well as the need to respect the sovereignty of Lebanon, its territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders, and the need for Israel to withdraw from all Lebanese territory without further delay within the 60-day period, while underscoring that the Lebanese army has confirmed that it was ready to redeploy in the villages of South Lebanon, as has been already demonstrated. Secretary General Antonio Guterres today stated in the headquarters of UNIFIL and Cora, stated that the continued occupation of the area of operation of UNIFIL by Israeli forces and military operations within Lebanese territory is a violation of the resolution and a danger for UNIFIL and must cease. Lebanon would like to reiterate its gratitude to the United States and to France for the vital role played in adopting this declaration of the cessation of hostilities. Lebanon would like to thank the Council and would like to thank UNIFIL, and underscores the need to ensure protection of its personnel and facilities. We condemn the repeated attacks by Israel against the UNIFIL positions and its targeting that threatens its personnel. Lebanon underscores the important role of UNIFIL in the future to confirm the withdrawal of Israeli forces and contribute to long-lasting stability along the border. It's also very important to continue coordination between UNIFIL and the Lebanese armed forces. Lebanon looks forward to having the international community stand side by side with it in this difficult period, and we're grateful for efforts and the support of the Security Council. Lebanon, that has suffered so much, deserves your support. Thank you.
Thank the representative of Lebanon for the statement. The presidency will now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Microphone, please.
Israel has always stated, and I reaffirm here today, we will do everything we can to bring our people home. This unwavering commitment to our citizens remains at the heart of all that we do. Mr. President, for years, Israel has warned of the growing threats in our region, warnings about Hezbollah's buildup in southern Lebanon, and violations of the 1974 disengagement of forces agreement in Syria. For years, these warnings were dismissed. Today, we meet with some hope for progress. We must reflect on those ignored warnings and the heavy price they caused. Israel has consistently acted to protect its people and ensure stability, and will remain steadfast in this commitment. These letters, Mr. President, contain the evidence, the countless, hundreds of letters we wrote, warnings and detailed reports that Israel submitted about Hezbollah's buildup in southern Lebanon, as well as violations of the disengagement agreement in the area of separation with Syria. These letters are proof that we told you this would happen. These papers should have been calls to action, but instead they were ignored, left to gather dust. Only when Israel was forced to act did this council find its voice. When it did find its voice, it unfortunately still failed to condemn the terrorists targeting our civilians. For years, this council has heard warnings about the growing threat Hezbollah posed to Lebanon, Israel, and the region as a whole. We warned of their stockpiling of thousands of rockets and anti-tank missiles, the smuggling of advanced weapons from Iran, and the construction of thousands of tunnel shafts and hidden military networks. We exposed Hezbollah's transformation of southern Lebanon into a fortress of terror. Today, we stand in the aftermath of a historic turning point. Hassan Nasrallah is gone, as are several of his successors, and Hezbollah has suffered a decisive blow. A ceasefire is in place. Lebanon has managed to elect a new president, a significant step forward after years of political chaos. But let us not be mistaken. Quiet for peace. The scars of Hezbollah's aggression remain etched into the land and the lives of those who endured it. Over 22,000 rockets rained down on Israeli homes, displacing more than 63,000 civilians. Israel uncovered and dismantled over 10,000 explosive devices, 870 launchers, and 60,000 communication devices. Much of this infrastructure was built just meters from UNIFIL positions. It was not this council nor UNIFIL that confronted Hezbollah's terror network. It was Israel. Through our determination and resilience, we not only defended our people, but created an opportunity for Lebanon to reclaim its sovereignty. Dear colleagues, it is time for this council to recognize what Israel's actions have achieved. By dismantling Hezbollah's terror infrastructure, we have given the Lebanese armed forces and the Lebanese government the breathing room to begin reclaiming their nation. This is a moment of opportunity, an opportunity to free Lebanon from being a failed state held hostage by a terrorist organization. But let me be clear, this opportunity will not last forever. Already, we see attempts by Hezbollah to rebuild. Weapons are being smuggled across the Syria-Lebanon border. Funds are being funneled to rearm Hezbollah. Hezbollah operatives remain active south of the Litani River in blatant violation of Resolution 1701. We will not allow history to repeat itself. This brings us to the situation in Syria. From September to November 2024 alone, there were hundreds of documented breaches of the 1974 disengagement of forces agreement. Military positions have been established within the area of separation in blatant violation of the agreement. Armed individuals routinely infiltrate the Alpha Line and tamper with the land in Israeli territory. These activities are not hidden. They are visible and have been reported extensively to UNDOF. In response to the emerging situation in Syria, Israel has taken limited and temporary measures in strategic areas to neutralize immediate threats. These actions were not taken lightly, but they were necessary to protect our citizens and preventing armed groups from threatening Israeli territory. Israel remains committed to the framework of the disengagement agreement, including the principles regarding the area of separation. We maintain close coordination with UNDOF. And I want to remind you what happened on December 7, when our forces helped safeguard UNDOF forces from attacks. However, the ongoing violations undermine the fragile stability of the region. Israel recognizes the vital role of peacekeepers on the ground in maintaining stability and places the highest importance on their safety. But it is time to address the failures in their mandates, which have failed to prevent aggression. Peacekeeping mission must not just exist. You have a lot of troops, a lot of soldiers, a lot of money, but they are not there just to be there. They must be empowered to act decisively. They must succeed in their mission by actively enforcing mandates and holding violators accountable. The discovery of massive terrorist infrastructure during the conflict highlights years of operational failures. UNIFIL's modus operandi must change to effectively prevent further violations and ensure that Resolution 1701 is fully enforced. UNDOF must ensure that violations are documented transparently and acted upon. Distinguished Council members, Israel is committed to upholding international agreements, including the agreement of force, including the disengagement of forces agreement. But our commitment to these agreements must not be mistaken for weakness. We will act against any threat to our security. Israel will not allow security threats to take root on its borders, as Hamas and Hezbollah did. The international community must take concrete steps to prevent weapons smuggling and Hezbollah's military rebuilding efforts. Failure to act will only invite further instability. The Council must face reality. Israel's actions have prevented the collapse of order in southern Lebanon and the area of separation. By dismantling Hezbollah's terror networks and confronting threats in Syria, Israel has provided a chance for the international community to reclaim peace. But this state of affairs will not last forever. This Council must support the ceasefire agreements, Israel's actions, and the full implementation of Resolution 1701. To Lebanon's representative, I'm saying here, Israel has given you a chance to rebuild. Seize the moment, the opportunity to reclaim your sovereignty and secure a future free from terror. And to Lebanon's people, I'm saying Lebanon belongs to you, not to Iran. This is your moment to take back your country and move towards a brighter future. Dear colleagues, Israel has done its part. We are committed to the ceasefire understanding and the US-led mechanism, having submitted hundreds of reports of violations, including 168 major ones. However, the LAF's progress remains slow and must accelerate. If Hezbollah attempts to rebuild, Israel will act decisively. UNIFIL and UNDOF must learn from their past failures and ensure their mandates are robustly implemented. Mr. President, to conclude, the choice before this Council is clear. Will you stand by as Hezbollah regroups, as terror networks rebuild, and as history threatens to repeat itself? Or will you act to ensure that Lebanon's future is one of peace and stability? Israel has shown what is possible when action replaces silence. The Council must follow that example. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Presidency thanks the representative of Israel for the statement.